Good evening, everyone. National Forum on Homelessness. I'm Donna Colombo. I am the founder and past executive director of Trinity Center and a member of the Walnut Creek Homeless Task Force. I'm pleased to be your moderator tonight, and joining me is Samantha Sansom, the City of Walnut Creek, as technical support. Our program is scheduled for about an hour, 45 minutes for presentations, and about 15 minutes for Q&A. It might be a little longer depending upon the number of questions we receive. All attendees are muted at this time. Questions for speakers, our speakers may be entered into the Q&A feature by clicking on the icon shown at the bottom of your screen that says Q&A. After all panelists have presented, I will read and direct questions that have been emailed and those entered during the Q&A. What might be good, however, is we want to make sure that we have all those that have been emailed. So you might want to re-enter them in the Q&A tool. If your question is specific, panelists, please so note in the Q&A tool. If we do not answer all of the questions tonight, we will answer them in the on our website and at a later date. Sorry, lost my track. The forum is being recorded and will be aired at a later date on Walnut Creek TV and made available on Walnut Creek TV's YouTube channel. Thank you very much, Matt. Matt Bollender is our technical support for that. We will also post them on our task force website. And there we go. I just lost my screen. Okay, hold on, a little technical blip here. I just lost my screen. This is, I can't see with the PowerPoint. Okay. So bear with us a moment. This is the first time we've done this live. Okay, thank you. So, okay, so we're ready to go. Sorry about that. I want you to all know that I'm a PC user and this is a Mac, and so sometimes there's a little, some little tricks that I don't know about. So the forum is designed to give you an opportunity to learn about the actions being taken in Walnut Creek and Contra Costa County to address homelessness. Next slide, please. We have a great program for you tonight. Our speakers include Walnut Creek Mayor Haskew, Mayor Pro Tem Wilk, Walnut Creek Housing Program Manager Margot Ernst, Contra Costa County Engagement Specialist Jamie Jeanette, City and County Homeless Program Services represented by Trinity Center's Associate Executive Director Marieline Dawes, and Coordinated Outreach Referral Engagement Core Coordinator Lisa Thomas, Walnut Creek Police Manager Marty Beggs-Casson, Homeless Liaison, and Officer Gary Silva, Homeless Outreach Program. Before we do that, however, just a brief information about the task force itself. Next slide. The task force was established in 2015 by members of the Walnut Creek Police Department and Trinity Center to address the growing number of homeless encampments in and around downtown Walnut Creek. Members of the task force now include representatives of the City of Walnut Creek Police Department, Contra Costa County Homeless Services, local businesses, nonprofit, charitable, and faith-based organizations, and the community at large. Monthly task force meetings are open to the public and participation is encouraged. Aligning with the Contra Costa system of care, our focus is on reducing the impact of homelessness in Walnut Creek. Next slide, please. Oh, nope, sorry. Go back. Okay, so a little bit about our mission. Mindful of the needs of the Walnut Creek community and the city's quality of life, the mission of the Walnut Creek Homeless Task Force is to seek compassionate solutions to homelessness and work collaboratively with the local and regional organizations to develop safety net services and the means for affordable supportive housing. So what do? Working in communities, we research best practices, working in committees, by the way, research best practices, advise, educate, and communicate findings to city leadership and community at large, and act as a channel for resources. The task force meets on the first Wednesday of every month via Zoom at 2 p.m. And for detailed information, simply visit the task force website, which is wchomelesstaskforce.org. All right, next slide. And this slide will it lists some of the accomplishments and the current projects that are underway of the task force, just to give you an idea what we do. So in 2020, early 2020, we established goals and set some priorities for 2020 and beyond. And then some of what we've accomplished over the years is a core outreach program. We now have a dedicated resource for Walnut Creek. And we have a safe parking program in partnership with St. John Vianney and Trinity Center with startup funds from the city of Walnut Creek. We've also established a communication and education committee, which is chaired by Lisa Andrews. We have developed a task force website, and we host annual forums such as this. This is our third, as I mentioned in the beginning. The current projects underway, they're in two areas: safety net services and shelter and housing. For safety net services, we are researching potential projects for public mobile showers, storage lockers, and trash disposal. For shelter and housing, we're focused on two areas as well: accessory dwelling units and tiny homes. The Committee for Shelter and Housing meets every the third Tuesday of every month. And if you would like to join that, simply shoot us an email. I think you have that in the previous communication. So next slide. And I want to remind you that if you'd like to ask a question to our panelists, please use the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen and type in your question. You can send in your questions throughout the forum, but they will be answered live at the end of the presentation so that we give each of our presenters a chance to give you the wealth of information that they have, and they may already answer some of those questions. And again, we may not be able to get to everyone, but we will release a full list of the received questions at a later date. Questions for asking for clarification may be answered as we go along if possible. We will try to do that. Okay, next slide. So at this point, I would like to introduce our current mayor, Loella Haskew.
Thank you, and thank you for the task force, and thank you for everybody who is here to learn more about the task force itself and how homelessness is impacting Walnut Creek. Let me tell you a little bit about what Walnut Creek as a city is doing. First of all, we in the last few years have had a fund that we set up as a result of making homelessness one of our major strategic goals. And we're using those funds to help fund operations at Trinity Center, and the Safe Parking Program, and the winter shelter. And we're getting close to winter, as you all know from the weather. We also work with the designated core team with Concord to help support this really impressive service. We have the Homeless Outreach Patrol officers, and you'll hear more about them later on. And we also have other fundings for homeless services providers through our CDBG and local grant programs. So we're well aware of the problem, and we are looking to work with the people that are providing the services to help. And after that, I'd like to introduce my colleague, Mayor Pro Tem Kevin Wilk.
Thank you, Mayor Haskew. So welcome everyone, and just a few comments on our future efforts to address homelessness. Through federal programs, we expect to provide funding to help homeless service providers with the costs associated with COVID-19 in addition to continued support for operations. We plan to continue with existing programs, as well as pursue new partnerships and collaborations with neighboring jurisdictions. We also have a continued commitment to increasing affordable housing opportunities in Walnut Creek. And we anticipate committing a substantial amount of CARES Act funding for rent and utility assistance to keep people housed particularly as the eviction moratoriums expire. As a city and a community, Mayor Haskell mentioned we can't do this on our own, and we can't. We would love to see an increase in community participation, and I encourage and invite residents to participate in the Walnut Creek Homeless Task Force. And with that, I'll pass it back to Donna.
Thank you so much. And our next speaker is Margot Ernst. I think you're on mute.
I am muted, yeah. Welcome, everyone. I want to just take a brief moment before I talk about affordable housing, just to say, I know it can be very awkward on a webinar. You can't see who else is there. And so I want to let the panelists and also all of you in the audience know that we have about 75 people here right now. It's been kind of growing over the last few minutes. So just to give you a sense, and I'm just really excited to see so many people coming out and interested in this topic and engaging. I'm going to just speak briefly about affordable housing. The focus of tonight obviously is on homelessness, but of course, access to affordable housing is a key component of the solution to homelessness. So next slide, please. We've been very fortunate in Walnut Creek because there's been a long-term commitment to increasing housing affordability in Walnut Creek and increasing access to housing. As a result, we've been very successful at adopting and implementing new housing policies that help support that effort. So in the last 2 decades, I will mention two housing policies that we've adopted that have been really critical. One is the inclusionary housing ordinance and one is the commercial linkage fee. And both of those help to generate fees and funds specifically for the development of new affordable housing. And those fees are paid by market rate residential and commercial developers. So over the past 2 decades, we've committed nearly $30 million towards the development of new affordable housing, which has developed over 400 new units. The majority of those are substantially affordable. So they're affordable to either people at 30% of area median income or 50%, which is extremely low and very low income. We have a new project actually that's being processed for entitlements right now that is proposed to be a 95 unit mixed use affordable project that's in the North Downtown Specific Plan area on Ignacio Valley Road. And next slide, please. And then I also wanted to just mention, we have a lot of other efforts to create affordable housing, and I can't go through them all today just in the interest of time, but I did want to mention, a lot of the city is zoned single family, which is true for a lot of the state of California as well. So there is an opportunity there in the single family zoned areas to create additional housing through accessory dwelling units. And the state has made a lot of efforts to incentivize and streamline and make it possible for homeowners to include and develop ADUs on their, or what are called accessory dwelling units, and for short, we call them ADUs, on their property. So the city is in the process of updating its ordinance. And I know the task force has a special interest in this, and they're really looking to this as a way to increase housing affordability. And there is a lot of opportunity because, as I mentioned, so much of the state is zoned single family. And so if you're interested in sort of following this process, there will be a way to sign up for an interest list, which we'll get to in a second. So next slide, please. And this last slide, I wanted to just be sure to have this up while I'm talking for the rest of my presentation so that you have a chance to write down the information that you see here. But if you go to walnut-creek.org/housing, you will see information and resources on all of our housing programs, some of which are listed on the left-hand side. That's the menu you'll see. So we have information that's related to COVID-19 and social services, some that the Mayor Pro Tem mentioned in relationship to rental assistance. We also have all of our resources for the existing affordable housing, and then all of our programs. We do have additional programs like a first-time homebuyer down payment assistance program and a home rehabilitation loan program. and information on all of our housing policies. And when you go to this site, there will be an opportunity to sign up for information, news, and resources as well. So that's it for me. I'll be able to answer any questions that you might have. And be sure, if you want to ask us follow-up questions that are specific about affordable housing, feel free to email housing@walnut-creek.org, and either I or someone else on the housing division staff will be able to provide a response. And with that, I'll pass it back to Donna.
Thank you, Margot. It's one of the very important things about affordable housing is that it is one of the tools in our toolbox towards the solution for homelessness, that we need to have the available housing that people can afford, and that affordable housing needs to also have services that are provided. And I know sometimes it feels like, or it seems like, no one is doing anything. So it's encouraging and it's exciting for me to see all the things that you have listed there under housing programs. And we're going to hear more next from Jamie from the county. Jamie?
Thanks, Donna. Next slide, please. So I want to introduce myself. I'm Jamie Jeanette. I'm with Health, Housing, and Homeless Services, which is the county homeless program. And my role is community engagement specialist. So I'm a good and easy point person. If you have questions about homelessness, reach out to me and I will help connect you to whomever we need to. So we collect a lot of different types of data about homelessness in Contra Costa County. And one sort of quick and easy data point is what's called the point in time count. And this is just a snapshot of one night in time. We do this count at the end of every January. That's something that's actually done around the whole country. So last year, or this year actually, in 2020, we identified about 2,300 people that were experiencing homelessness in our community on that one night. We know this represents about a third of what we might see over the whole year, but this is a snapshot that you can compare year to year. In that count, we saw about 700 people that were in shelter and the rest were unsheltered. And those are folks living in cars, in abandoned buildings, in encampments, basically in places that are not fit for human habitation. And about 5% of the people that were identified were households and families. So that means there were children. Next slide, please. So I just wanted to do a quick snapshot of what's available in our county around homeless services. I think a lot of times, Donna, you said it sometimes feels like nobody's doing anything, and there's actually a lot of work happening on the ground. So on the left-hand side, you'll see there's really 3 points of entry for somebody that's seeking services in our county. So they can call 211, so that's call. They can walk into a care center, and I'll talk a little bit about that in a minute, but it's essentially a brick and mortar building where somebody can walk in and access some basic services. So Walnut Creek is fortunate to have one of those. So that's the Trinity Center, where people can actually get services on site. And then the last is CORE, and that's our mobile outreach. And you're going to hear from my colleague, Lisa, in a little bit about that. So through those 3 access points, what can you get connected to? So for people that are maybe at risk of becoming homeless and they're not homeless yet, prevention services are really designed to keep people housed. If somebody maybe has become recently homeless and there might be still some options for places where they could land safely that aren't our shelter system, Rapid Resolution may be able to help them. And people get screened for all these things as they hit our access points. Street outreach, as I said, CORE is the street outreach, and they're really designed to help people that are living on the street unsheltered to get some basic supplies, but also to really start to connect people in with services. Emergency and interim housing is really our shelter system. And then we have housing navigation services. So we don't just, put people in shelter. We're really trying to get people housed. That is the goal of our whole system, is to try and get people housed. So housing navigation services are really designed to help with that. And then permanent supportive housing. So we do have a range of housing options in our system that are for people that need ongoing rental support as well as services. And then we connect people with other options as well. Next slide, please. So COVID has made things really interesting for a lot of us. And I just want to talk a little bit about what our system of care is doing. First thing is, in terms of data, Contra Costa Health Services has actually developed a whole dashboard. So you can see for the whole population in the county, the number of tests and whatnot, but we actually have a special dashboard just for looking at data related to homelessness. So I pulled this data on the 22nd of October, but you can see at that point there were over 6,000 people experiencing homelessness who had tests for people who were experiencing homelessness. And at that point, we had 149 confirmed cases for people that were experiencing homelessness. Next slide, please. So when COVID hit, as you might imagine, it made things really complicated, particularly if we think about our shelter system. And a lot of our shelters were big congregate shelters. So that's like you have a bunch of people in one big room, which as we now know is kind of a nightmare when you think about COVID. So the state recognized that and quickly secured some money that they've been distributing to communities for something called Project Room Key. And the idea is for counties or communities to go and secure some hotels and basically move people that were experiencing homelessness from shelters into hotel rooms as a way of really trying to interrupt the spread of COVID. And so this data actually, it looks a little different even today, but we have PUI is just a term for person under investigation. So if somebody's maybe waiting for their test results, they're trying to figure out what's going on and they need to be isolated, there are some rooms for those folks that may be housed, but just crowded. But we have 494 rooms for people that are experiencing homelessness, that are at high risk for complications from COVID. And we're doing a great job of getting people into those rooms. So we have about a 99% utilization rate. And to date, we've served over 1,200 people through that process. So some people come through and they get housed. Some people come through and they end up with friends and family, or they may decide to go back on the street. But we've served about 1,200 people so far through that program. Next slide, please. And just a quick note, and I think that it was actually became final today. So the state also put out money for communities to purchase hotels because one of the things that we lack in Contra Costa is brick and mortar sites, both for shelter and for drop-in services. So we were able to purchase the Motel 6 in Pittsburgh, which was already one of our Room Key hotels. So we now are going to have brick and mortar site services available in East County, which we have not had. Next slide, please. So I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Lisa, and I'm going to jump back in a minute to talk about some data, but I want to let Lisa tell you a little bit about all the great work that she's doing and she and her team are doing, especially in Contra Costa and Walnut Creek.
Thank you, Jamie. Can we pause here for just 1 second? There are a lot of questions in the Q&A about data. So just hold on a little bit because after Lisa, Jamie's going to come back and give you a lot of data. So, okay, so Lisa, you all set?
Hi, I'm Lisa. I'm the Core Outreach Coordinator. I just want to let you know that there are 12 core teams remaining operational during COVID-19, and services they provide have been even more crucial during this time. They're providing 9,500 food packs. They've provided 7,100 hand sanitizers and masks, and 100 solar batteries chargers to charge the homeless population's phone. Training and education on both COVID and fire safety, encampment displacement support, connections to health and behavioral health services for testing, and assessment and direct referrals to the health team for replacements in the hotel. Next slide. CORE has a Walnut Creek team that they share with 50-50 with the city of Concord. And we provide our clients with emergency supplies, connections with health and benefit providers. CORE has creeks teams that work with the public health works on educating clients on how to keep trash out of the creeks, including the Walnut Creek creeks that they have. They provide garbage bags and trash pickups in the creek. CORE checks in with police dispatch daily. PD calls priority. They call anytime there is a homeless related issue and aren't violations of law. Police homelessness task force is ending, so CORE will be more crucial than ever. Now, we work closely with Trinity. The relationship with Trinity Center is amazing. Communication, both sides are great. The Trinity staff contacts the team whenever CORE services are needed, and CORE is happy to comply. The team visits Trinity Center on a daily basis, checking in, talking, using social distance to clients, and making referrals to the hotel on Trinity's behalf. They are also working with Walnut Creek community and providing resources and services that we can offer. They connect with Walnut Creek concerned citizens who have concerns, and they with new clients on a daily basis, referring them to any and all resources they qualify for. In a nutshell, Walnut Creek and CORE have the best condo ever. Back to Jamie, she'll give you some data.
Thank you, Lisa. So I'm going to talk a little bit specifically about Trinity and CORE data, but I also just wanted to back up for 1 second and just say sort of big picture, one of the things that we know about people experiencing homelessness, at least in Contra Costa, from surveys that we've done, is that the majority of people are living unsheltered in communities or near communities where they're from. So anywhere between 50 to 80% of people are from the city or the county where they're living. And so I think one of the questions I often get is, well, like, aren't all these people coming from somewhere else? I've met many, many people that, are living in a bridge a mile from where they went to high school. So a lot of times folks will really stay where they're from. So I just want you to think about that as we're looking at this data. So this is looking at sort of comparing last year to this year for the same time chunk. So from March to August 2019 to March to August 2020. And understanding like COVID has happened, right? Like things look a little different, but we wanted to show both what's happening for CORE and for Trinity, which will give you a pretty good picture of Walnut Creek overall. So we can look at the number of contacts that CORE had in Walnut Creek. So CORE contacts have gone up about 100% over the last year, and Trinity Center contacts have gone up about 21%. So CORE, again, is really kind of out in encampments, out in the bushes, really looking for folks. And Trinity Center is a fixed site where people are coming in. So they have to kind of know about that site to come in. We have seen that one of the things we look at is the crossover of like how much overlap is there between who CORE is seeing and who's Trinity is seeing. So we see that there's about a 30 to 40% overlap. So about 30 to 40%, depending on which year you're looking, of Trinity consumers are also served by CORE. So that means there's this whole other population that aren't touching Trinity Center and that CORE is serving. Next slide, please. So we also can look at the race and ethnicity distribution of who folks are seeing. And so the light green is last year and the dark green is this year. So for Trinity Center, which is on the left-hand side, we see that it looks about the same, slightly more African Americans that Trinity is seeing than last year. For CORE, we see a pretty significant bump in the number of African American folks that they're seeing that are unsheltered, and a decrease in American Indian. And I'll say those numbers are pretty small for American Indian, and a slight increase around Asian for that CORE scene. Next slide, please. So also if we look at age, and this is one of the questions I get a lot, is about older adults. And we know that sort of there's a growing population of older adults, and especially that are experiencing homelessness. So left side again is Trinity. And so you can see that population is roughly the same from year to year about their age breakdown. They're seeing slightly more older adults over 62. CORE is definitely seeing more older adults in the 55 to 61 age range, and more transition aged youth. So that's like 18 to 24-year-olds, and definitely more under 18. Next slide, please. So gender distribution, it's about, roughly 50-50 between Trinity and CORE, between male and female. Next slide, please. And one of the other things we wanted to look at is for people that are reporting a mental health diagnosis. So we don't have access to people's medical records. This is people that are willing to disclose as they're accessing services. But we looked at sort of a percent increase. So for Trinity Center, they've seen about an 80% increase in their clients that are reporting a mental health condition. And this could be anxiety, depression, bipolar, schizophrenia. It really can run the gamut. That can also be substance abuse and addiction. And for CORE, they saw about a 31% increase.
Amy?
Next slide. Oh, yeah.
Amy, just 1 second. There was a question, and I wanted to ask it here rather than
Great. Please.
Relevant. What help is there for people who are experiencing homelessness and mental health concerns?
That is a great question, and I'll answer some of it, but Lisa, feel free to jump in. So county mental health, there are county mental health programs, and one of the things that both the care center staff and the core staff are trained to do is to know how to refer people to available resources. So if somebody's struggling with a mental health problem, or they have some addiction issues and they want to start to get connected into possibly inpatient rehab or outpatient services, the staff that are working on those front lines are really trained for how to get people connected to those things. The staff is also trained about how to get people health insurance if they're not insured, so that they can then begin to access more of those services. There are also a number of community resources for mental health and drug and alcohol addiction. And so calling 211 is another way that people can start to get connected.
Also, there is this is Lisa, sorry. Also, there is an access line for mental health that you can contact to get connected with. And then there's an access to call to get a hold of alcohol and other drugs to get connected there too. We also, as CORE, call and mostly with the mental health team through the county. And when we feel that we have engaged with someone that might need some extra mental health, we reach out to them and then they connect them with the action team.
Thank you. Yeah, so there's a mobile mental health crisis team.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa.
Very helpful information. Okay.
And that's it. And feel free to reach out to me at any point. You can also hit our website and you can send us questions there too. That's all I have.
Thank you. So next we will hear from Trinity Center, Mario Lindas, who is the Associate Executive Director.
Hi, thank you, Donna. Yeah, I'm here today to tell more about Trinity Center for those who do not know what we do yet. And I'm also here to tell more about the trends we're seeing, how Trinity Center and our community is impacted by COVID-19. Trinity Center is a day facility. We're providing services for the homeless community and for those who struggle with housing or food insecurities, the working poor. We have basic needs on site like meals, laundry, showers, clothing, a place where they can get their mail, charge their phone, etc. But a big part of our program is also our case management team. We call them member advocates, or member advocacy team. Our member advocacy is daily on site to help our members out as best as possible to make a difference in their life and to set goals with them to help them with that and to guide them through that. We are doing so by working with them on action plans. Within our member advocacy team, we have a substance use counselor. So he is working one-on-one, providing groups. As you can imagine, COVID-19 did trouble that a little bit, but he is making referrals to detox facility, residential facilities. We also provide tenants assistance. St. Paul Commons provide housing for some of our previous homeless community from Trinity Center, and we're guiding them in that process on how to deal with going from homeless to housed and how to we help them out with all their struggles. And Trinity Center, I'm really happy that we can share that we just launched a program specifically designed for the young adults, the transitional age youth, aged 18 to 24. We know that they do not self-identify them as quickly as being homeless. They sleep on a couch, for example, at a friend. And we do know that the need is there. So we are trying to build a bridge between their needs and the services Trinity Center is providing. Trinity Center does have an evening program, a winter program, and a safe parking program, as Donna talked about already earlier in this meeting. Safe parking program, of course, for those who have a car and do need a place to sleep in their car in a safe place with a restroom available on site. And the winter program provides overnight shelter for some of our members in the cold months of the year. Next slide, please. So some of the numbers I would like to share with you that we've seen, some trends that we see in our community. If we combine our numbers and if we look at our numbers from 2019 over 2020, then we see a significant increase of unique individuals that are coming into Trinity Center that do have a job, 45% increase. They do have a job, they do have their income, but they're struggling to find housing. They're sleeping in their car. They do not make enough to rent an apartment. Another one that I would like to highlight out is an increase of unique individuals, men age 25-34, and those numbers are the months prior COVID and the months after COVID. We saw an uptick after COVID kicked in of young adult men that came in were in need of our services. So they lost their job, they didn't have a place to go, but they were in need of the services. And as you can imagine, everybody was impacted by COVID-19. Trinity Center was impacted and our community is impacted. We are currently operating from outside and it is getting colder, so that's for sure not ideal. We're trying to manage that as best as possible. Our winter program, also as you can imagine, a room with a bunch of people sleeping is not per se COVID-19 safe. So we're dealing with that as best as possible to still provide an evening shelter, a winter shelter during the cold months. And Trinity Center is really blessed with so many volunteers that help Trinity Center out. Before COVID, they were coming on site and they were helping us out on site. Unfortunately, we had to suspend our volunteer program. We are currently looking into see how we can combine efforts, and people want to help us out. We would love to have them help us out. So we're currently looking into to see if there is a virtual way on how to do so. I am here tonight, so if you have any questions, please drop them in the Q&A.
Thank you very much. Next on our agenda, and remember to please put your questions in the Q&A if you have more for our speakers. Next on our agenda, we will hear from Marty Beggs-Kesson. Thank you.
Hello, everyone, and I'm glad that you're here tonight. This is a great forum for everyone to give you an idea of what's going on in the city of Walnut Creek. My name is Marty Beggs-Kesson, and I'm a police manager over the Support Services Division at the Walnut Creek Police Department. Officer Gary Silva is one of our HOP team, our Homeless Outreach Program team members. And unfortunately, I have to be the bearer of bad news. He is unable to join us tonight. He got pulled out and pulled away. Police work doesn't stop, and unfortunately, Gary was unable to make it tonight. So I apologize on his behalf. If you have questions regarding specifically for Gary, please reach out to us and we'll make sure that those questions get answered if I can't answer them tonight. Next slide, please. Just wanted to give you a quick little overview. The HOP program, Homeless Outreach Program, began in 2019. It's a relatively new program with the police department. The year-to-date service calls that we have for 2020 reflect about half of the stats from 2019, and it's about the same time period. A lot of that has to do with COVID. COVID has changed the way we do police work in the world, in California, and obviously in Walnut Creek. Last year, events generated, or 2019 events generated surrounding homelessness were about 2,800 compared to 1,360 this year to date. Homeless cases generated were almost 700 last year, and they're 313 this year. To give you perspective, year-to-date calls for the entire city of 2019 was 40,660. Compared to year-to-date, our citywide calls are 26,761. So we're looking at, a little over 50%, probably closer to 60. So it does have an impact on police calls as well. Next slide, please. And one of the reasons why COVID has affected police work is that the CDC put a moratorium on a lot of things that police officers were allowed to do. as in breaking down or dismantling homeless camps. Unless they could have alternative housing for them. Luckily in this area with CORE and the Trinity Center and the services that are provided, people do have a lot of alternative housing for them. The reason that the governor and the CDC requested the dismantling of homeless camps to be put on a moratorium was, like we heard earlier, most of these people are from this area, and when you dismantle where they're living, you disperse them within the community where they're unable to get to the services that they need. So that is a big focus of what we did, was we put a stop to that. And also one of the things that COVID has created is we are no longer doing proactive enforcement, and that is to protect our officers from exposure to COVID. So obviously these things have changed because of the world that we're living in right now, but I want to reassure you and the community that the suspension of the HOP team is temporary. We do have some staffing issues. As you may have heard, we have several retirements, including our police chief. So there's a lot of movement in the police department. And unfortunately, when the HOP team had to be reabsorbed into our patrol, and that they had to be reutilized into patrol and are not able to specifically focus on the HOP team. And that also went hand in hand with the moratorium on a lot of the proactive enforcement that they were doing. But that doesn't mean that they haven't stopped. Gary Silva is very involved when he can. He utilizes core services. They are very important to us, as well as the Trinity Center. And I just wanted to give that shout out because I know Gary wanted to be able to say that to you all. Next slide. And this is the person that I'm talking about, Officer Gary Silva. He's very proud member of the police department, and he's a very proud member of the HOP team. And like I said, he wishes he could be here tonight. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Marty. Please tell Gary we missed him. So I had the pleasure of working with Gary on the HOP team when I was at Trinity Center, and he was an enormous help to our staff, but most of all to our people who come to Trinity Center, because he understood their needs and their plight, and he has a very good way of working with people that are under great distress. So please extend our well wishes, and we missed him, and we'll catch him next time. So now we are going to enter into the Q&A session, and I do have several. I have answered some online that were quick and easy to answer, and they were just directly to the person asking the question. One of the things that, yeah, do you think we want to stop? So one question for Margot and others at the city would be regarding low-cost housing. Is low-cost housing allowed only in a certain area, or can it be, or will it be distributed throughout the city? Because that seems, the question is, isn't that a better model? So the question to you, Margot.
Yeah. Thank you. So the answer is kind of an and both. We do actually do both right now in terms of having affordable units that are dispersed within a market rate project, and also some projects that are 100% affordable. And there are different kind of pros and cons to each. And so I do believe that both are needed. Under our inclusionary ordinance, a market rate residential developer can include affordable units in the project, or they can pay a fee. If the units are included in the project, they don't have the same depth of affordability as we get when we develop 100% affordable projects. And so I do think that both are really valuable. When we do have 100% affordable projects, we do try to disperse them throughout. Like the core area is primarily where we do the development for that type of multifamily housing. But We do try to disperse them. I did notice the question was related to specifically by the Pleasant Hill BART station, and there are, you know, there are several developments there. Some are in the city of Walnut Creek and some are not. But it is really important to do both, and I agree that having them dispersed throughout the community is really valuable.
Thank you, Margot. Our next question comes from Jordan, and the question is really for the county. And it's a very general question. Might take a while to answer this one. We might also include it on our website. Why does Contra Costa County tolerate unsanctioned homeless encampments?
This is Jamie, so I'll take that one. So this question comes up a lot about encampments, and there are a lot of communities experimenting with what are called sanctioned encampments. So that's where a jurisdiction, usually a city, would decide that they're going to set a certain area. So I live in Oakland, this has happened, right? They set a certain area. You can be in this particular area and be unsheltered in your tent or whatever it is, and there's porta potties, and the jury's really still out about a lot of issues related to sanctioned encampments. So they're very, very expensive. I think that's one of the biggest things, is that they're very expensive to maintain, and people are still living in substandard conditions. They're very challenging to manage in terms of health and safety, when those resources could potentially be spent towards shelter or getting people housed. So I think that's one of the biggest concerns. And there are, you know, every city kind of makes their own decisions about this. But generally speaking, in terms of like the federal perspective, if you look at USICH is sort of a federal resource, and they have a great document just really outlining why there are still a lot of concerns about the use of resources towards a sanctioned encampment. That said, you know, there are people like Trinity Center, there are other agencies experimenting with safe parking, which is it's kind of like a hybrid. And safe parking programs tend to be pretty successful and a little easier to manage than sort of big sanctioned encampments. And I don't know if anybody else wants to jump in on this, but that's sort of the long answer.
Any other person like to answer any part of that question? The second part of it, that question, there were actually a couple of questions on that, but one had to do with what about the tents cities that are popping up on 680 between Pleasant Hill and Concord?
Yes. So the other thing I'll say is one of the things that our core outreach teams do is they are going out. So if new encampments are popping up, you can call 211 and they will connect you to a core team, and you can say, hey, there's an encampment that popped up here. And what core will do is actually go out and check in on those folks and see if they are interested in any services that are available and start to get them connected. If a jurisdiction does decide to abate, that's sort of the language we use about if they're going to clear an area. So right now under COVID, ideally that's not happening, because as you saw, it really displaces people. But CORE also will go in advance. So usually there's a notice that gets posted that tells everybody, okay, this is going to get cleared. So part of CORE's job is to go in advance of the clear out. And again, usually try and hold a few shelter beds if they're available, try and offer people as many resources and services as they can before they get moved. And then we'll usually, wherever they end up, which is usually not very far away from where they were, CORE will reach out again and just continue to try and connect people to services so that they know what to do when they're ready for that.
Thank you so much. And the next question is for CORE. It has to do with volunteers. Can I volunteer to be part of the CORE team? And can I invite neighbors via Nextdoor to donate various items, particularly around the holidays? Lisa or Jamie?
So I know that we are not taking volunteers at this moment. I'm not sure when they would be taking. I know they were taking interns for a while, but unfortunately, due to COVID, we're not taking anything like that. And I think you're welcome to take any donations and gather any bags. CORE would gladly go and pick them up if you need them to, or participate in handling it.
And I actually have, so it's November's Homeless Awareness Month. And one of the things we did this year was to build a toolkit. And in that toolkit is a whole listing of agencies that are in need of donations, and they will tell you exactly what they need and where to drop them. So I will try and I'll put that link in the answer.
Great. So during COVID, it's very difficult for the homeless service agencies to accept donations and volunteers. It's one of the things I know that Maria-Line touched on is they really miss their volunteers. It's so helpful, but thank you for the person who wanted to know how to do that. The next question has to do with, this may be for a couple of people. It's by Alex. How big is the gap between the number of people who are homeless and the number of housing openings or capacity in Walnut Creek? Want to tackle that one, Margot? You're on mute.
I'll probably need to defer to Jamie. You know, the issue of the housing available if you're trying to move somebody out of homelessness, there has to be housing that's affordable to them available. So just like the general kind of vacancy rate probably doesn't really address the gap for those who are either experiencing homelessness or recently homeless. And so if you look just at our affordable units, it's, you know, we don't have enough. There's huge wait lists for all the units. Whenever I can give you an example, like we had a 55 unit project that was affordable. Or actually, if I look at St. Paul's Commons, which was our most recent one, it's 45 units. I don't recall how many applicants there were, but there were thousands applicants for those
500,000. Yeah.
So, the wait list is long, and we do have in some of our projects, some of the affordable units are specifically designated for chronically homeless or formerly homeless individuals, and those access to those is oftentimes done through the continuum of care. And so I am going to kind of pass over to Jamie if she wants to add, but needless to say, it's insufficient, of course, but.
Yeah, there's a big gap. And I was actually just looking, we have done a very preliminary look, and we're in the process of doing a deeper analysis about that gap. But I don't have any concrete numbers for you, but it's big. I mean, we're talking, a couple of thousand units of housing just for people experiencing homelessness throughout the county. I don't have it specifically for Walnut Creek, but there's big gaps. And the other thing to think about is sort of like the range of affordability. So, when Margot was talking, she talked about, a few units that are set aside for extremely low and very low income. That's a lot of the population that we're working with. Like, standard affordable housing is not even going to be remotely within reach of people that are living on Social Security. So it's thinking about not just like building affordable housing, but what population, like thinking about the most vulnerable population. And there's, you saw the numbers, there's thousands of people in our community that even may be working, but they're underemployed or living on very low income.
Thank you. And our next question may have a very long answer, but see if we can give a short answer. So Maria-Line and perhaps Lisa, the question is about how do you help someone who's coming in? How do you help them get back on their feet? Can you give us, how about a success story that you've had, Maria-Line?
Yeah, of course. I would love to share success stories. So your first question, how do you help someone if they come in? That varies so much because every individual is different. But as I mentioned, we try to work with action plans. So we try to set goals. And for each individual, again, that is totally different. For one individual, a first goal that we would like to reach with them is apply for a new California identification card again. That might be just enough for someone to get things started. For another individual that comes in, in this way, bigger, it sometimes involves family reunification. It involves a resume building, trying to get a job, getting connected with the resources. Lisa mentioned earlier about the access line available for mental health resources or substance use resources. So we try to really look at those individuals and see what they need, and help them out as best as possible. Yes, and your other question, Donna, was, what was that again? Sorry, can you repeat that again? Oh yes, a success story, of course. Why do I forget those? Because they are so important. One success story is really recently, and I just shared with you all that after COVID kicked in, we did see an uptick in young adult men that came into use Trinity Center services. And one of those specific I would like to highlight out is a young man. His age was, I believe, 24, 25, and he lost his job. He didn't have family around. He didn't have a place to go. So he came into Trinity Center daily. With the help of someone in our community, we could connect him with a tutor that helped him with math. I'm always clumsy with the A in the English language, but they helped him out a lot. He applied for the Navy, he did the test, and he's accepted, and he's now in a boot camp. So he's really getting there. Yeah, other success stories are people that do find a job, or do find a second job to afford their housing. Those success stories, well, that's just amazing, and that's what why we do what we do.
Thank you. Yeah.
And I want to just add to it. Trinity Center and CORE had a joint client that we've been connecting with, who we both encountered, getting him his documents to get into some type of housing, and he got connected to a permanent supported housing. He should be moving in within the next couple of weeks.
Great, great. I'd just like to share in my experience that sometimes it's not an easy answer. There are many, many reasons why people are homeless. And if you think that you are having a bad day, imagine what it's like to live on the street. An example I can think of is a woman who came to us several years ago. She was coming to our center, and our staff was working with her for 1,147 days. But I want you to know that she was housed after that 1,147 days. She had 2 PhDs. She was not someone you would think would be homeless at that stage in her life. She was in her early 60s. And so things happen. And Trinity Center and CORE and all of the other services at the county are there to help. It's very, very difficult. And sometimes it just takes a lot of patience. And so I want to thank everybody on here that has that patience. Sometimes there is a happy ending in that story. So thank you. So I think we are almost at the end. Can we do a time check? 7:28. We have 2 minutes. And I think we all answered most of the questions. Oh, here's a new one that we haven't really talked about, which is, why aren't tiny home communities with wrap services being utilized? They cost much less to build than brick and mortar. And that's from John. And John, I want you to know that the Emergency Housing and Shelter Committee of the Walnut Creek Task Force is working on that. So we're looking to see if maybe that's something we can provide in the short term, because you're right, it's cheaper, it's faster. Community acceptance, however, is not. So we have to go through all of the steps, all of the permitting with city, county, and state in order to make something like that happen. Takes a long time. So don't expect it this year, maybe next year, but we're working on it. But thank you for that question. So are there any other comments that the panelists would like to make before we close out the session? No?
I'll just put in, I will just make a comment that, you know, there were so many great questions tonight, and I encourage folks again to sort of echo the mayor and Mayor Pro Tem. I encourage folks to get involved with the Homeless Task Force if you're interested. get engaged with some of our other programs and the activities that we're doing. It's always, you know, so much better when we all are working on it together.
I would agree. Thank you so much. And please consider joining the Walnut Creek Homeless Task Force. It's a great group of people in across all industries. And I would just like to remind you that the Q&A will be listed on the task force website. The recording from this forum will be posted on Walnut Creek TV and Walnut Creek TV's YouTube channel. And hopefully we look forward to the next forum. Thank you all so much for participating and being with us tonight. Bye.